Our guest today is Professor Lisa Bortolotti. Professor Bortolotti is a full professor of philosophy at both the University of Birmingham and the University of Ferrara, and she is a co-investigator of the EPIC project, the Epistemic Injustice in Healthcare. Professor Bortolotti, I would like to ask you a couple of questions about your research. The first question is about potential connection, relation that you see between your own project, the EPIC project, and the PRIN project we are running here.
Yes, thank you for the question. I think there are a number of connections. First of all, both projects are very interdisciplinary and involve different teams in different institutions, and I think that gives both projects a better insight into the phenomena because there is the clinical perspective, more empirical perspectives offered by psychologists and sociologists, but also neuroscientists as well, but also the kind of the philosophical and more theoretical approach to the notion of epistemic injustice itself. And obviously the kind of domain of application is very similar. So EPIC as a broad look at different aspects of healthcare. So we've got different case studies that involve also somatic illness or vaccination, for instance, but at least the kind of case studies that I oversee are all about mental health and mental illness, so there is a connection there as well. And I think it's a very important connection because traditionally philosophers have been very resistant to applying the notion of epistemic injustice to mental illness. The thought being that if you are someone with mental health issues, then probably you are not a reliable knower, and so it is actually justified and it's not an injustice not to believe you. And I think both projects are really addressing this as problematic. And in the process of trying to understand how we can apply the notion of epistemic injustice to this domain, I think we are also thinking about new ways of thinking about epistemic injustice, not just about being believed, but also being talked to, engaged to, listened to actively, and being understood, which I think is actually at the core of the original notion of epistemic injustice. So I see a very many connections between the two projects. One thing that is very distinctive about the PRIN project is the focus on metaphor, which I find fascinating, and it's not something that the EPIC project has focused on so far.
Thank you. My second question concerns the use of the term engagement you have been using in your definition of epistemic injustice. Could you tell us more about that, about the potential implication for a role of the body and for bottom-up mechanism in epistemic injustice, in determining epistemic injustice?
Yes, I think that's a very important shift. I think now that the notion of epistemic injustice is being applied to so many different domains, people are trying to think about a way of making the notion a bit less technical, more popular, a bit easier to understand. And many people are starting to say that what really the focus of epistemic injustice should be is the fact that people should be taken seriously. But, to be taken seriously is not a very precise notion. There is a lot that could go into that. And so one idea is to think carefully, what does it mean to be taken seriously? And my thought is that engagement is really the core notion. So the idea is that we don't owe to anybody the fact that we believe whatever they say, but what I think we owe to other people, to fellow agents with whom we interact, is to engage with them when they are offering an epistemic contribution. And as you were suggesting in your question, engagement is not just about listening and asking questions of clarification, but it's also showing with the whole of your body that you are actually in a position where you want to try and understand the perspective of the perspective of the speaker. And in our analysis of conversations, which could be evidence of epistemic injustice, we don't just look at what people say, at the words that they use, but we look at the tone of voice that they use, but also whether they are making eye contact, whether their body is leaning in or pulling back. as a sign that the person who is listening, the interpreter, if you want, is actually trying to get to the same level of the speaker and trying to get their perspective on whatever they're discussing. So I think the notion of engagement is interesting because, to some extent, still, it's still a little bit vague, a little bit like being taken seriously, but it gives this sense that there is some sort of commitment that you're making to understanding the position of the speaker, which is not something that involves just your speech acts or the kind of words that you use when you address the speaker's position, but also the fact that you are communicating to the speaker with the whole of your involvement, that you are interested in what they have to say, and even if you end up not agreeing with what you have to say, and I think in the case of mental illness this is a very important point, because sometimes people communicate things that do not represent reality as we see it. But still, we are making a commitment to try and understand what kind of message they want to give us, independent of the way they represent reality. And I think sometimes that's communicated more with the body than with the words that people use.
Thank you very much, Professor Bortolotti.
Thank you.